people are saying the designers at the Met Gala completely missed the point, but I genuinely don't think that designers are just not seeing fashion as art or misinterpreting the theme. In a way, I see what he's saying, because if fashion has to reference other art forms in order to be in the conversation, then is it really art on its own? But before you come for me, I'm Isabel. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because if you're into fashion and internet culture, this channel might be just for you. So let's get into it. The Met Gala's dress code this year was fashion is art, and everyone's expectations went through the roof in all kinds of directions. Vogue announced that the dress code encourages attendees to consider the many ways that designers use the body as their blank canvas. This is very broad, and that's the point. There can be an infinite number of interpretations, and designers pretty much have free reign to be as creative as possible. And even though the theme was broad, there were two main ways in which people interpreted the theme. Number one, from the Met press release itself, the gala dress code will be fashion is art, inviting guests to express their own relationship to fashion as an embodied art form and celebrate the countless depictions of the dress body throughout art history. And this is where most people imagine these huge displays of creativity. Fashion as art that stands alone. The second most popular view was the reinterpretation of other art forms through fashion. And this also makes sense because the exhibition itself is relating fashion to other art forms. The Met press release also mentioned that fashions will be juxtaposed with works of art from across time to create connections that will range from the formal to the conceptual, the individual to the universal, and the playful to the profound. And while it is true that the exhibition going on and the dress code for the Met Gala are two different things, they are related. So even though this could have been a full-on parade of the most extravagant looks ever, both of these interpretations are valid. But most of the disappointment comes from the fact that it seems like we saw more of the second than the first, when some of us would have liked to see more of the first than the second. Fashion rarely gets the opportunity to really defend itself as an art form that can stand on its own. And now we have an art institution that puts fashion at the center and is making the statement fashion is art. The expectation was for designers to go all out in proving that fashion is art. And even though the exhibition itself would place fashion with other art forms, in that moment, at the Met Gala, fashion itself is art. So I don't think the disappointment was because the references were bad. It's just that people wanted to see fashion fight for its place, and it seems like it didn't. Most of what we saw was fashion referencing other art forms, and this was done beautifully by many people, by the way. One of my favorite examples being Emma Chamberlain, one of my favorite looks of the night by Mugler, and was hand-painted by artist Anna Delarie. There's always exceptions, of course. We have Robert Woon, who, according to the public, won the Met Gala this year, because even though a couple of his looks referenced other art pieces, most of his designs at the Met Gala emphasized the looks themselves as art instead of just referencing it. But in the end, it still felt like the night as a whole was not as dazzling as we thought it would be. For this year, designs could have used the body as a blank canvas to create masterpieces that stand alone as art. Most people chose to reference other art, which is still technically on theme, but there was a lot of room for the designs themselves to be the art piece, for designers to let their imaginations run wild and think of the most outlandish thing that they can create in the most beautiful way. And now we're left with this hole in the fashion as standalone art interpretation that many wanted to see. The reason people wanted to see fashion standalone as art is because fashion has been fighting for recognition as an art form for decades, and we can see the effects of this bias in the Met Museum itself. The Costume Institute is the only department that has to be funded separately. It started as the Museum of Costume Art, but even when they merged with the Met Museum and became the Costume Institute, it had to basically fend for itself financially since the late 40s. And because it wasn't considered high art, it was just dismissed as commercial or a woman's interest. Patrons were not interested in donating to that, so the museum required that the Costume Institute raise its own funds. And so the Met Gala was born. Now we're left with the bigger question: is fashion art? And many thought that because the designers focused on referencing art, that this means that ultimately they don't see fashion as art, or it diminishes fashion's legitimacy as an art form. But I don't think that's the case. It could be that in their interpretation of the dress code, taking into consideration what the museum was going to show, they decided to stay on theme in that way and reference other art forms, since the pieces in the museum are currently being displayed alongside other paintings and sculptures as well. The theme was so broad, rightfully so. Many just decided to stick to the format that the museum had already adopted. And it's okay for people to be disappointed with the looks. If you had a certain expectation and it wasn't meant, that is only natural. But I don't think in this case that means that the designers in general were completely off. There were just certain interpretations, including mine, that weren't covered as much as some of us would have liked. And sometimes that's just how things go. So, did you think the designers were completely off, or were you just disappointed because they didn't show what you were expecting? Or maybe you loved the looks and you're just like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I thought everything was great. Let me know in the comments. And if you're into fashion history, deep dives, and random commentary, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. See you next time. Bye.